Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is Professor Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations and Political Theory. Joins us from the Macalester College. Joining me is Professor Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. Ariel Cohen is a Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, joins us live from Washington, D.C. And Mr. Cohen, if I could start with you, what do you make of this tough talk at the White House? One attack launched by President Trump, the other by Vice President J.D. Vance, and President Zelenskyy not ceding an inch.
First of all, I think this is not the way to conduct negotiations. This is a break with every tenet of diplomacy we're aware of, maybe from the 17th or 18th century. And doing this sensitive engagement with the cameras rolling, either it was incompetence or it was done on purpose. Secondly, I advise companies and leaders on strategic communications. I would have advised President Zelenskyy not to engage, not to answer, and whatever he had to say behind closed doors. In an open forum like that, he should have answered the media questions, not engaged with J.D. Vance, who was clearly hostile, and then he kept answering President Trump when the best thing he could have done was to shut up. But more broadly, this is a historic moment in which the United States not only appears to abandon Ukraine, but it appears to enter in a historic confrontation with our European NATO allies and side with Russia, as we saw in the United Nations. Unprecedented political development that raises questions about the future global architecture for the world.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll come to that future global architecture, because is President Trump actually now focusing on China? Is that the big agenda for him? But I'll come to that in the second part of this debate. For the moment, I want to focus, Sushant Sareen, on what happened at the White House, at the Oval Office. And, as Professor Cohen said, this is virtually unprecedented. You cannot, this was virtually like a pincer attack. One side, President Trump, the other side, J.D. Vance. Plain truths being spoken. You don't have men, you don't have material, you're not winning this war. But President Zelenskyy also kept pushing back, not ceding an inch. Was that a mistake?
So Gaurav, look, it was very clearly extraordinary diplomatic drama of the kinds we've not seen in the past. But I think something like this was to be expected. Look, let's face it, Zelenskyy thought he has this license to say and do anything, to be as obnoxious as he wants to be, as entitled as he deems fit to be. And he expects even people who have no dog in this fight, he expects everybody to come and support him. And if they don't, then he disses them publicly. He's done it, including with our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, right? He's tried to do it. Mr. Modi did not bite the bait and he let it pass. He played it diplomatically. Zelenskyy tried to push the envelope once again in the White House today. Now, some of the points which the Americans are making are very, very clear. This war has reached a stalemate. Now, if you want to break this stalemate, you will have to escalate the conflict to a point which, as President Trump says, you are going to be gambling with the Third World War. And the Europeans, again, are full of stuff for everybody else. But what do they bring to the table themselves?
Yes.
Okay. So now, if supposing the Americans are walking out, let's see the Europeans fight this war. Let's see what they have. For example, I was just reading somewhere today, Luxembourg is saying we stand with Ukraine. They have an army of less than 1,000 people. Okay. They are going to stand with Ukraine and do what?
Okay.
This is the same thing with many of these others. They have their own problems. The Americans give them the heft. They give them all the technology, or most of it. The American influence and so I think you need to start listening to the American advice. A lot of what was said
So
today,
they need to start listening to the American advice.
One second, Gaurav, let me just add something. Just one sentence more. Look, I also understand where the Ukrainians are coming from, right?
Yes.
They are in a stalemate situation. They're not winning this war. They have their backs to the wall, and they have their own position. Now, that does not mean that their position is tenable, at least insofar as the war is concerned.
Okay.
And maybe they need to strike a deal, maybe a bad deal, but a deal nevertheless.
Cut your
because
losses is what
if they
you're
have a bad
saying.
deal, then they have nothing.
Okay, stay with me, Sushant Sareen. This is very interesting conversation. The only person smiling right now and year to year would be President Putin. Tatiana Kukreva is a senior journalist who joins me from Moscow. And Tatiana, I'll come to you in just a moment. I want to bring in Professor Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, joining us from the US. Professor, how do you view what happened at the White House last night and what's been happening ever since? Neither side's willing to cede an inch. Should President Zelenskyy have inked a deal, even if it was a bad deal?
Well, I've never seen anything quite like that in my professional career. The way in which these two heads of state interacted with each other. I have to say, though, that I think President Zelenskyy is wrong. He's on the wrong side of things, which is not to say that President Trump is on the right side of things. You know, I'm not quite sure how to articulate this.
Yes.
But Zelenskyy is wrong and Trump is right. I guess that's the best way I can put this. Zelenskyy, I'm sorry, I have no time for him, given his history and but he needs to get on the right side of things here. He's losing the war.
Yes.
A, he's losing the war. B, he needs to get his diplomacy better, right? Especially with respect to the United States. Trump and Vance are insane. I have no time for them. I think they're crazy. And so we have a whole bunch of actors here who are crazy. We have a clown, Zelenskyy. We have a clown, Trump. We have a clown, J.D. Vance. It scares the heck out of me that conglomeration is shaping the way in which this really important world is unfolding.
Okay, let me, before I bring in Tatiana, those are very, very, interesting and strong words you've used. But does that, Ariel Cohen best describe the situation right now? Plain speak, and truth that comes both from President Trump and from Vice President J.D. Vance. There is no way Ukraine can win this. Tatiana, give me 30 seconds. I'll come to you immediately after Ariel Cohen. President Zelenskyy perhaps should have realized if Trump wants that deal, and he spoke of it, America has oil, America has gas, America does not have rare earth minerals. If that deal could have come, guarantees would have automatically followed with American soldiers or American civilians and workers on ground. Russia clearly couldn't have attacked, except that would also mean, Mr. Cohen, losing Zaporozhye and Kherson apart from Donetsk and Luhansk.
No, of course, a lot of these rare earth minerals and strategic minerals, which is a different story because strategic are lithium and aluminum and uranium and copper and chromium and all the things that are not rare earth per se. But the question is, you're asking absolutely right. Was Zelenskyy in a position to sell the United States Ukrainian minerals that are now under the Russian occupation? And I don't think anybody is that silly. But there was another aspect there. The total market, the global market of rare earth, of the lanthanoids that are used in aerospace and computers and semiconductors, $3.5 billion. Yes. Trump is saying, oh, we gave you $350 billion. It probably, he exaggerates by a factor of 2. But regardless, 65% of mining, 85% of refining are in China, not in
Yes.
Ukraine, not
Not
in
in
America.
America. Yes.
So what? It would have taken 500 years for the United States to recoup these investments and supporting Ukraine. What are we talking about here? So my argument is either it was a huge mistake by Zelenskyy, and with all the respect to the professor, I would not call him a clown. He got elected. He conducted the war. He is a leader of his people. He's still very popular in Ukraine, by the way. And he is an embattled, elected leader. In terms of President Trump, he has a very different view of American foreign policy than anybody since the end of World War II until the end of the Biden presidency. He does not see the Euro-Atlantic alliance as the core need and the core pillar of American security. In that respect, he's somewhat of an isolationist, and there's a lot of people who are China hawks who say, let the Europeans take care of themselves. We need to focus on Indo-Pacific and China, and this is where India is so important for the United States.
Oh, you're absolutely right, and that's why we've been focusing to a very large extent on the Indo-Pacific and on China. That's the real expansionism and threat that the world faces. Did Biden go wrong there? We'll talk about that in just a moment. But Tatiana, has Kremlin already popped the bubbly? Is President Putin celebrating already?
Well, Gaurav, I think that President Putin, I'm not assuming that he's awake at 6:30 in the morning. Let me just also say that I have to commend this historic moment. I believe the only time I actually gave commentary this early was the 24th of February 2022. Yes. So that is quite something. Look, first of all, to comment on something that Mr. Cohen has said, I believe that Zelenskyy came there to sell minerals that only exist in the Donbass region. That's actually not correct. There are some there are things that they could have still signed for, because there are minerals in the Dnepropetrovsk region as well, and there could have been something that he could have technically gone for. But to keeping this in mind, it takes a very inadequate person to come in without any sort of leverage, to come in to beg for your supper, and to do it in a way that Vladimir Zelenskyy did it. I mean, this sense of entitlement that this man possesses is just astounding. It has been astounding to me for years now, this sense of that, look, you are obliged to help me. You are obliged to rescue me. You are obliged to pay for this. And, having listened to Donald Trump for even the first 4 years of his presidency, it was very clear that, he is first and foremost, again, he's a businessman. He's a very rich man. And very rich men don't like their staff, basically, to misbehave and to talk to them as equals. So we will see what comes out of the next round, and especially when President Putin, President Trump speak. But I dare say that what President Zelenskyy did yesterday might have made that moment that much closer, actually.
So is this the end of the war, Sushant Sareen? Do you look at it as the war coming to a close? Because both J.D. Vance and President Trump very clearly told President Zelenskyy, you're not winning this war. You'll come out okay only if you sign a deal. So that's the best case scenario for you. But Europe, and you spoke of countries with an army of just 1,000 in Europe saying that we stand with President Zelensky and Ukraine. But so does Canada, so does France. You heard what Emmanuel Macron said. You heard what Spain's Pedro Sanchez said. We've heard what Justin Trudeau in Canada have said. What does this mean? Is NATO dead?
So look, I don't think NATO is dead as yet, but I think maybe it's gasping for breath. But look, wars are not going to end simply because one side is losing the war. It depends. Wars are ultimately calculations in the minds of people. Now, I think the calculation in the Trump administration's mind is that this war is not going the way it should go. So it's better to end it here. When you still can retrieve something from this conflict. Otherwise, who knows what direction it will head into. I also sense a certain amount of fatigue, especially in the current US administration, to keep funding this kind of a war because it distracts the Americans from certain other priorities which they might be setting for themselves. Now, that can be a matter of debate, and that's a debate Americans need to have among themselves, what their priority should be. Should it be Russia, which simply does not pose a similar kind of a threat either to Europe or to the US, as probably China does in a strategic sense in the next 20, 30, 50 years, right?
Yes.
But that's a calculation these guys have to make, not us. We will have to deal with China, we will have to deal with the world as is. And for the Westerners to imagine that, the entire global security architecture rests on there being this transatlantic alliance of theirs, I think they are mistaking the rest of the world for the West, which clearly is not the case. The other thing is, do the Europeans really have the stomach for a fight? It's one thing to say, okay, fine, we are going to give weapons to the Ukrainians, let them go and fight. We'll give them money, we'll take some of their refugees, let them go and fight and die for us. Will they have the stomach to send their own soldiers in? Will they have stomach to send their own armies in? Will Norway or Finland or all of these countries which are acting as though they are some kind of world leaders, will they have the stomach to fight this war? We've seen what happened in Afghanistan.
Yes.
There were these much wanted European armies would start crying the moment they had to fire shots and they saw their
body bags come in.
Soldiers die. So let's not kid ourselves on what the Europeans can or cannot do. But if Zelensky wants to fight to the end, I don't see how anybody can stop him. That's up to them.
Can Zelensky still, Professor Latham, continue to fight till the end, or is this the end of the road? Because without American weapons, can he fight that war? J.D. Vance and President Trump both made it very clear he doesn't have manpower. The way people are being forced to go to the front lines, according to reports that come in. But Professor Latham, can Europe continue to support, and in what way? Money, weapons, without American support coming in?
It's at the end of the day, it's really got nothing to do with American support and weapons and European weapons. The fact of the matter is that Ukraine is running out of manpower.
Yes.
They're not in a position to prosecute this war for about 5 minutes more. And it breaks my heart, in a sense, because they have fought a valiant war.
Or they have.
But they are out of gas. And there's no way in which one can tweak this and frame this in any other way. I'm sorry, but Ukraine is losing the war, and it's going to be lost, and there's no way in which any person can turn that around. I wish it were different. I wish the reality were different, but it's not.
So if US were to pull back, Ariel Cohen, if the US were to pull back, can Europe sustain this fight with money, material, or will Europe have to commit men on ground, and will it do that, or is just lip service, money and weapons?
I'm sorry, but does anybody think that Vladimir Putin thinks he can take over Europe? He couldn't even beat Ukraine.
Yes.
To me, it's obvious. This is from a Russian perspective, this is the worst outcome possible. You know what? They really tried hard to take over one, frankly, irrelevant bit of Europe, and they couldn't do that.
Okay.
Tatiana
Wants to respond, Professor. With your permission, can I quickly get her to respond to this point before I come to Ariel Cohen to respond to the other point on Europe? Tatiana, you concede, I mean, the superpower Russia, after 3 years, could only take 20% of Ukraine, could not take down Kyiv, could not take down President Zelensky's team.
And why do you think? Look, this is getting a little bit ridiculous. Russia never needed, nor has it ever declared as a goal to take over Ukraine. The only goal that we've been moving towards, and we've been doing that very successfully. You can, but we would need to see the maps on the screen, which you obviously don't have, is moving the Ukrainian forces out of eastern Ukraine, out of the regions that asked to join our country because Russian people were being killed there. Nobody said that we need to take over Kyiv, and for God's sakes, we need to stop peddling this idea that Vladimir Putin aims to take over Europe, the world, this ridiculous claims of world domination that have been peddled by Ukraine since the beginning and by very, very scared Europeans. But just from the amount of fear going around the European Union, I would actually suggest they don't want any real engagement on the ground. Yes, they can sustain this conflict for some time.
Okay.
With arms, with guns, they would need to be on the ground because Ukrainians are there's not going to be enough Ukrainians, and very soon. That's one thing that Donald Trump has said that nobody in the West has ever even said before. It's extremely important to hear.
Okay, let me get Ariel Cohen. To respond to this. Does Europe have stomach for a fight to sustain this fight without the United States of America contribute money, material, warlike stores, or even commit men on ground, sir?
Europe doesn't have a choice. Either it's going to disintegrate as a coherent Western alliance because the United States is going to be engaged elsewhere, either in Indo-Pacific vis-a-vis China, or just withdraw into the Western hemisphere and become even more isolationist and abandon the Pacific. Could be that. But Europe has a choice. Either with the German leadership, it will need to rebuild its defenses. Germany, France, and UK, plus others. And Poland, very important. Poland, Germany, UK, and France. 2 nuclear powers, soon 3, because Germany is actively thinking about becoming a nuclear power.
Okay.
With the GDP that is going to be 7 times bigger than Russia. Of course, they could do it if they had a political will, which right now they probably don't have.
Would they, with MERS likely to take over in your view?
Just let me finish one point about Ukraine allegedly run out of people. Yes, the personnel situation is dire, but given enough technology, given more drones, given more missiles, Ukraine can inflict very serious damage, and it's inflicting serious damage, for example, to the Russian refineries, and the Russian production of gasoline is going down. As to what Russia intended to do, of course it intended to take Kyiv in 3 days. The Russian spokespeople said it in February 2022. Russia, in the ultimatum of December of 2021, demanded full American and NATO withdrawal to the NATO posture of 1997, meaning all of Eastern Europe, Poland, you name it, So Russia was aiming to shift the balance of power in Europe and therefore in Eastern Hemisphere.
In fact, Tatiana, I was reporting from Kyiv when the war started, and in the first phase of the war, Russian tanks had come inside, or virtually at the outskirts of Kyiv, when suddenly the Javelin missiles that President Trump refers to, there was a massive attack of those Javelin missiles. Ukrainian forces were really fighting hard. Russian teeth came in, the tail did not follow, the tanks were out of fuel, and they had to go back. We reported that on ground. Ariel Cohen, do you see this as President Zelenskyy now piping down, realizing things had gone horribly out of control? He always knew he couldn't carry on this fight without American weapons and support. The game of brinkmanship, he's blinked?
In my book, he misread who President Trump is. He misread the geopolitical priorities of the Trump administration. He made a huge mistake, both in communication and in pushing his points too far, and he did not paddle back enough. He needed to apologize. I know several people in whose opinion he should have made an apology to Trump. He needs to understand the global pecking order, at least how Mr. Trump perceives it. Mr. Trump is on top, and President Zelenskyy is lower than Mr. Trump. And he needed to communicate that tonight on Fox. He missed that opportunity. And as long as he is not rebuilding the relationship, and honestly, I'm not sure if he can. I don't know if he's going to resign or call new elections or do something else. But Europe by itself, in and of itself, does not have the military industrial capacity to supply to Ukraine what Ukraine needs to at least continue fighting Russia to a stalemate in such a way that Russia will agree to a peace that is acceptable to Ukraine. And secondly, without the United States, security guarantees are not possible. And clearly, Mr. Trump is not willing to articulate what kind of security guarantees he is willing to provide. And Europe did not specify if it can, or it didn't say that it can send at least 10 brigades with a nuclear umbrella that are necessary to keep Ukrainian security intact in the future.
So you think that is what it will take? Tatiana again has a big smile on her face, but I'm going to come to you in a moment, Tatiana, because I want to get Sushant Sareen also to weigh in. 10 brigades and a nuclear umbrella, that clearly is not happening. Does Europe have the stomach? I have Sajid Tarar joining me from the United States of America. Sajid Tarar, welcome on India Today. Give me a moment to come to you, sir. Sushant Sareen, should President Zelenskyy have furiously backpedaled? Yes, things got out of control, but furiously pedaled back. But then he has to get back to Ukraine, and he can't get back to Kyiv unless he has the security guarantees. If he signed that deal and went back with nothing, he couldn't have survived in Ukraine.
Gaurav, there was going to be no security guarantee that was going to be given. I think the Americans had made it quite clear. What they were willing to offer is a kind of a security guarantee that, look, if we invest in Ukraine, if our people are going to be present in Ukraine, whether it's for, exploiting the mineral resources in Ukraine in partnership with the Ukrainians, whatever it might be, that will ensure that nobody will attack Ukraine. Now, that was the assumption. Zelenskyy clearly wanted to enter into the NATO or a NATO kind of a security umbrella through the back door, which is why he was asking for those kind of security guarantees. Now, if the security guarantees are that the Europeans are now going to send, as I think Mr. Cohen was talking about, 10 brigades with a nuclear umbrella, this is exactly what Trump is trying to avoid. He says that, look, you're gambling with the Third World War, and I'm not interested in it. This piece of real estate is just not worth it. I'm obviously paraphrasing, but essentially it amounts to that.
Okay.
And the Europeans then need to ask themselves, Gaurav, this is important, that even if they're willing to back the Ukrainians completely, the Europeans need to ask themselves, till now, one of the grouses that Trump had against his European allies was that they are mooching off the United States. Are the Europeans now going to start spending 4-5% of GDP to build up their military sinews and their military industrial complex? Because that means that this very nice, comfortable life which they had, taking 2 months off, holidays and roaming around the world while other people work their butts off, the Europeans can't do that anymore. Are they ready for that kind of a world? I am
And
not
do they have
quite
the
sure
wherewithal
that
for it?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then living this very nice life and pontificating to the rest of the world on
Okay.
how the rest of the world should be much more enlightened and much more nicer, etc., etc. I think that time is gone.
Yes.
So let's wake up, smell the coffee, and move forward. Unless, of course, somebody has a death wish, and then there's very little you can do about it.
Do they want to do the kamikaze act in the 21st century? Clearly. Okay, Professor Cohen, I'm coming to you in just a moment. Professor Latham, I want to bring in Sajid Tarar, Trump Republican Party leader and CEO of Center for Social Change, joins us again from the United States of America. Sajid Tarar, even within the United States, President Trump is being criticized. The Democrats are saying, sad scene, utter embarrassment for USA. This is a disgrace. It's a great day for Putin. President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance are at best, as some commentators say, lackeys for President Putin. Response, sir.
Sir, reason the Democrats are criticizing because Ukraine war is an ATM machine for them. And it's an embarrassing today what America saw, that Americans, they are saying that we have given you more than 300 billion. And the Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine, he's saying he received just $70 billion. So they have to criticize because this entire thing is started by the Obama and the Biden administration. And at the same time, the Europe is still going through a Marshall Plan syndromes, not spending anything on security, not contributing to the NATO, and always looking for the handouts from the United States. And United States has to get up. I mean, say we have to make America great again. So how can we do that if everybody's milking us? And the Ukraine war is nothing but a money laundering machine for Democrat Party, and it has to be stopped. And today, the world has seen that kind of attitude. President Zelenskyy came into the White House and giving a lecture to the President Trump that you will start feeling the heat of Atlantic won't save you in the future. So the thing is this: we are not here to get the dictation and to teach us how to live, how to protect ourselves. He has to be thankful the way the president said that I gave you javelin versus Obama gave you sheets. And not only this, Donald Trump has a huge mandate to deliver to Americans to make this country safe and great again.
Okay. Before I bring in Professor Latham, Tatiana, President Putin and Russia, how is Kremlin viewing this? Will they now just look forward to that dialogue with President Trump for a solution with or without Ukraine and Europe on the table? Or will they wait for Europe to join them on the table? Ukraine will have to fall in line.
Well, Europe was never at the table. Neither was Ukraine.
Yes.
From the very get-go. This conversation is going to be between President Trump and President Putin. And let me remind you that Russia does have rare minerals that it can sell, not give, what Ukraine would have done, but sell, which is a very different position, if you understand, what I mean. And I do believe that this conversation has just gotten very, very much more interesting. But let's make one thing very clear. We're talking here about, and Mr. Cohen, who is more delusional than President Zelenskyy, is talking about an actual nuclear conflict in Europe between Russia and European nations.
Okay.
And it's not just, it's not just that. He actually thinks that Poland
Professor Cohen
is
and Professor Latham, Mr. Cohen and Professor Latham want to come in quickly, 30 seconds each. Adel Cohen, go on, sir.
First of all, if panelists are going to engage in personal insults, especially Russian propagandists who are lying into our faces, I'm going to leave. But I wanted to make a point about nuclear guarantees. We have nuclear guarantees in Korea, and the Ukrainian ceasefire is not unlike what happened in 1953 in Korea. There was a ceasefire. It lasts now for almost 70 years, more than 70 years, and there are American nuclear guarantees. I do not see why we cannot have that between the United States and Russia, or between the United States and NATO, because in 1994, let me finish, in 1994, Russia was party to the Budapest Protocol that guaranteed security of Ukraine, and there was a peace treaty, treaty of eternal friendship, signed between President Yeltsin and President Kuchma, and then another treaty. So there were three treaties that Russia guaranteed territorial integrity and sovereignty of Ukraine, and it tore it apart and threw it in the garbage.